One of the things that gives me the greatest joy is sitting behind this microphone and having conversations with people like yourself, James, having conversations, just trying to, as it were, pick the brain of those who are doing amazing things globally. And of course, I started out, as I alluded to earlier, just focusing on entrepreneurs.
Hi, I'm James Taylor, business creativity and innovation keynote speaker, and this is The Creative Life, a show dedicated to you, the creative. If you're looking for motivation, inspiration, and advice while at home, at work, or on your daily commute, then this show is for you. Each episode brings you a successful creative, whether that's an author, musician, entrepreneur, performer, designer, or thought leader. They'll share with you their journey, their successes, their failures, their creative process, and much, much more. You'll find show notes for this episode as well as free training on creativity over at jamestaylor.me. Enjoy this episode. Hey there, it's James Taylor, and I'm delighted today to welcome onto the show Heneka Watkis-Porter. Heneka is a serial entrepreneur, author, speaker, fashion designer, and podcaster. She is the founder and CEO of Patwa Apparel, an authentic Jamaican clothing brand. Heneka is also the creator of the Caribbean's first Virtual Conference and Expo, the Entrepreneurial You Virtual SME Conference and Expo. She is also the host of the Entrepreneurial You Podcast and organizer of Leadercast Events in Jamaica. It's my great pleasure to have Heneka with us today. So welcome there.
Hey, thank you so much, James. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Absolute pleasure.
So how are things in sunny Kingston, Jamaica today?
It's sunny Kingston, Jamaica. Oh my gosh, it's warm. It's nice. I'm looking on the outside, like I'm in my home office, and I'm peering through my windows, and I'm seeing how bright and sunny it is. And I had my morning walk, so it's really good.
Wonderful. So tell us what's going on in your world just now. What are you currently working on?
So right now, I am at the tail end of a Leadercast event that I just hosted. So I just completed Leadercast Kingston. In fact, just this morning we had our Leader Award following that we nominated and awarded. So just watching her being promoted on TV this morning. And just coming out of that, I'm just trying to go through that period where I at least strive. My mind and my body will allow me to just settle a bit so that I can rejuvenate for the other activities coming up. Another Leadercast event, my book tour, both locally and in the US.
So tell us about it. I mentioned you're this serial entrepreneur, you're an author, speaker, fashion designer, and you're also a podcaster. But let's talk about the Leadercast side of things first.
Right.
So first of all, what is Leadercast? What were the origins? How did they get started? And what's your vision for it at the moment?
All right. So Leadercast is a US-based leadership event. It's the largest one-day leadership event globally, where over 100,000 leaders from around the world gather to listen to leaders that are worth following. So, and that's the mantra of Leadercast, to develop leaders that are worth following. So it's based in Atlanta, Georgia. And in the live event, you have about 7,000 people in attendance. You have some really big name speakers, Andy Stanley, Michael Hyatt, and a host of others who every year they gather and they deliver based on what the theme is. Now, over time, they recognize that, look, we can't just be doing this great thing and be keeping it to ourselves in the US. We're now going to be allowing persons to simulcast around the world. And so in 2018, I reached out to Leadercast, and based on what I was doing, they saw me as a perfect fit for their program. And so I was allowed to stream in Jamaica. And so for the first time last year in 2018, we streamed 2 events, Leadercast Kingston, which is a general live event. And then in October, there was Leadercast Women. And so, of course, that's a little more niche. We focus on women and so on. So I started that because when I look at what I was doing, being an entrepreneur for over many years, and I now decided to be contributing to the entrepreneurial ecosystem, not just as an entrepreneur, but to feed into that in terms of leadership and training. I decided, I'm handling the entrepreneurial side well. I want to also bring into that the leadership aspect, because what I recognize is as entrepreneurs, we sometimes don't have, we're not taught leadership. We just think that it's magic and it's just going to happen. And so I decided to pair that. And here I am now doing these events in Jamaica, writing for the Leadercast blog as well. And so just this wonderful partnership, and I love it.
So how did your journey as an entrepreneur get started? Where did it all begin for you?
All right. I would love to say it started in 2007, but I think it went way back. So as a little girl, in retrospect, I realized that, because I didn't come out of the most pleasant of circumstances. So as a little girl, I remember even trying to help my grandparents with money to go back to school. I would sell apple at my gate, because it's a very tropical country. I grew up in the country area, in the rural areas. So I would get apples from my neighbor's tree, and I'll put a little stall at my gate, and I'll be selling apples, right? And so I found that from way back then I was quite entrepreneurial. And as I grew older, even in my teen years, I recognized I had this drive to start a business. And this drive, like, I would agonize over it. Even when I just started working, I would agonize over it for weeks on end, and it's like I couldn't sleep. And so there was a point when I decided I'm just going to leave it, because so many ideas came into my head, James. Ideas such as, I'm going to start a business that is, I'm going to have a fabulous clothing boutique. I'm going to have a salon, a full service salon where you come in and spa, where you get all your treatment, or it's going to be a Jamaican restaurant. There are so many things that came into my mind. And then I decided, I'm just going to leave it, because I remember just even searching online for business plans. The internet was just was young in those days. And I began searching online for templates for business plans and so on. Eventually, though, I left it. And in 2007, August 7th to be exact, I was home recuperating from a minor surgical procedure I'd done at the University Hospital in Jamaica. And I was supposed to be away from work for a week, resting, right? Resting. And I started watching this magazine program. It's a staple. It still goes on today on our local station here. In fact, I made reference to it earlier. And I was watching that program, and I remember somebody coming on to talk about something that they were launching. I don't remember what it was to this day, but all I can remember is I jumped out of bed immediately, because I had that aha moment. I totally forget I should be resting, I had that aha moment, right, where I'm going to start a clothing line. And this clothing line is going to be about Jamaica. It's not going to say Jamaica in the name of it or anything, but it's going to be something that resonates as a Jamaican and with Jamaicans. And so I jumped out of bed, starting to ask a colleague of mine from previous work spaces, what name would you give to a brand that is Jamaican? And I, just really brainstorming with other people. Within 2 weeks, like, nothing they said really, really resonated with me. Within 2 weeks, it just popped into my head. Patwa Apparel. And so I went and I got it registered and I started immediately.
So Patwa being like when you talk, you have a Patwa, like when I'm in London, we have a big Caribbean population in London, and so you hear them having conversations, and there's a Patwa, there's a way of speaking, there's a way of conversing.
Yeah, so Patwa is, and there is a big debate on this, and depending on where you are, where you're from, and perhaps your social status or your class or something, because Jamaica is a very classist society. Let me just get that out there. We're very classist, right? And so depending on where you're from and all of that, the debate is on as to whether Patwa is a language, right? Or whether it's broken English, right? My take on it is a language of its own, and the fact that just as you have English, which and other languages, which are compilations of other languages, right? So they say that Patwa is broken English, and it has Spanish, and sure, it has all different elements to it, because that's how languages are formed, right, based on the Latin roots and all of that. So it is a language of its own, and so it's what we speak as Jamaicans. So you're British, you speak English, right? We speak Jamaican, right? It's my first language. The debate is on as to whether it's a first or a second language. It's my first language. I tell people all the time, I'm extremely bilingual. I speak English extremely well, and I can talk Patwa very good too. See what I did there?
Exactly. But it's interesting. I mean, there's been controversy about this as well, in terms of learning in schools. So some schools were pushed, and this isn't just in the Caribbean. I know in India and other places, friends of mine live, where
when they went to school, they were always taught, okay, you had to learn, we call it the Queen's English. Everything was in this like a certain type of English, I said a more British style of English. And what they've been finding recently, and like let's say if I'm from Scotland, so we speak a dialect which is different from English, and is depending on where you live in Scotland, you use a different Patwa, different language, different dialect that goes on there. But when you go to school, you have to learn this way in this traditional type of English. But what they've done some studies on recently, and they've actually said if you allow students to study using that dialect, the place of where they're brought up with, in my case, in like Lowland Scots, where you are, Jamaican as well, is actually they've been shown to learn better than if they're all immediately forced into learning a certain standard type of Queen's English, as we call it.
Absolutely, because that's the language of your heart.
Yeah.
And when it comes from your heart, that's the purest form of anything.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's just about, as you say, you're bilingual, you have these different ways and you can move back and forth between those as well. So
Code switch, we call it, right?
Yeah. So you mentioned like having that aha moment going, okay, I'm going to start this apparel brand, this clothing brand as well. Mm-hmm. Where did you go next? And tell me, what was maybe a decision that you made in doing that, which you put your heart and soul into it, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out exactly like you'd hoped? And what was the lesson that you took from that?
All right. So what I did, so that was the aha moment came, and within 2 weeks, I decided it's going to be Patwa, and I started, doing some research on it. That was, I think, in August. By September, I was in London. I remember spending some time with my sister on vacation, but I could not rest. I was just thinking about how I'm going to approach this thing. So as soon as I got back, I started approaching companies in Jamaica, and the idea that I had initially was that, so the Jamaican language, for example, we say no bother me, and then in brackets around the back, I would say leave me alone. And so that was the initial thought that I had. And when I came back and had a discussion with one of the then suppliers, and she was like, why not just put the everything on the same side? So if you're saying no bother me in English, you have that interpretation under what you have there. And so that was something like, having this discussion really made it much more clear, and I could see how it worked for me. So that was the initial stage for me in terms of just doing that and moving forward. There's so many lessons, like what we're doing. Let me just backtrack a bit. What we're doing is actually using imported shirts and just slapping on the design. And I came up with the ideas, and then I got some people on board to design it for me, because by then I used to work in companies that I had colleagues. I know where to go. Like I didn't have a formal business education or structure. Well, my degree's in business, but that was more theory than anything. So I didn't have that formal structure, but we come back to that. So when I decided I'm going to be doing that shirt and importing, we worked with the imported shirts for a while, and then I wanted it to be more authentic. It had to be made. The shirts had to be made in Jamaica. So not just designed, but made in Jamaica. And so that made, because one of the things that I was driven by is this statistics that I like to quote all the time, is that we're 0.004% of the world's population. Jamaica is. And when we look at how impactful our brand is globally and the affinity people have to Jamaican culture, I just knew it would have been a winner. Mm-hmm. And so with that, of course, along the journey, I mean, we could fast track to 2012, because at one point, I was doing this part-time. I was still in my full-time job. I quit my full-time job in 2011. In 2012 is where I would say I had my biggest failure regarding that product. So picture 2012, it's Jamaica 50th celebration. So we're celebrating our 50th year of political independence from Britain. And it's also the year when we were at the Olympics, and Usain Bolt and everybody was doing great and amazing stuff was happening. So for anybody who was involved in my type of business, it was the thing that was going to make us billionaires. We were going to just retire, and everything was going to be great, right? And so I came up single-handedly with some very horrible designs, very horrible dated designs for the brand. I sold a set to a department store, lots of them. Like at that time, it was close to $1 million worth of products, million Jamaican dollars worth of products. And for a small business, that's a lot. And they were complaining that the designs were not moving. And in good faith, and because I wanted to maintain that relationship, I decided that I am going to exchange those products, take back those products and give them some designs that I know that I'd given them before and worked. Took those back, and there was nothing I could do with them. I decided I'm going to give it to the Salvation Army. In retrospect, I should have had a discussion with my accountant, because that no had to be expensed, and it being expensed, it just hit my balance sheet in a wrong way for a very long time. So the lesson I learned from that in the whole process of, my creative process, because, you had to understand that I'm a solopreneur and I'm doing most of these things by myself. And I just did not collaborate as much as I should. And that for me was, the most important lesson. Stick to your strengths and allow other persons to work on the things that you're not good at. Because by no stretch of the imagination am I a graphic designer, right? And designing, making designs for t-shirt, etc. So
I guess, yeah, it's like on any kind of business, it's knowing which part of the value chain where you add the most value, whichever your thing. I was having a discussion the other day. I was speaking in Ecuador, in Latin America, and there was a woman there that's also working on an apparel brand, and she's working with indigenous women in communities there, where previously they were doing work for very, very low cost. And she said, if we did a couple of things in terms of taking some of your indigenous designs, but making them relevant for other types of markets, we can actually kind of go up the value chain. And that thing which you were previously only getting $1 for, you can get, $5 or $10 for as well. So that was her expertise. It was knowing about positioning, how to position things, how to take things up the value chain. One of the things you talk about, the idea of collaboration, is you then also moved into podcasting, which is the type of collaboration as well. So tell us what that journey, and first of all, that's how I first learned about you, was through the podcasting side of things. So what role does podcasting have in your overall business? What does it serve?
Okay. All right. So fast track, I started my business in 2007. By 2013, well, even before then, I was now being sought after to share my knowledge and to speak with young people who want to start a business, to speak with the women, and so on. So many doors have been opened up for me, and I've been given a platform. No, I thought to myself, I began thinking more like, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I wanted to share more with persons. And so what I decided to do was, I decided to write a book. My first book I started writing in 2013, and it was published in 2014, 15 Hints to Entrepreneurial Success, Lessons from a Caribbean Businesswoman. So in 2014, I published that book. It was we had a great book launch. It was just somebody liking it to, they're just being in a room, and, one of those big international speakers coming down, and it was all of, that kind of energy they got in the room. And so it was a moment when I'm thinking, how can I best serve the people that I am reaching out, that seeking after me? So then I decided to start a radio program. And the radio program was started in 2014 as well. And that was called the Entrepreneurial You. So it was on the local station here, one of our most prominent local stations. And I did that for 3 seasons, a 13 episode season every year. So from 2014, 15, and 16. And then at the end of doing the 2016 edition of that show, it was a Caribbean edition whereas initially I would just be talking to Jamaican entrepreneurs, for that last season, I spoke with Caribbean entrepreneurs, right? And so that's when I got my microphone. I was testing the whole thing. And the idea came, I want to reach more people. I want not just to be talking to people in Jamaica. I want this to be global. And so that's when the Entrepreneurial You idea as a podcast. I mean, the backstory is I went to a conference. I was talking to, a technological guru, as it were, in Jamaica, and we were having discussions. And fast track to that, by 2017, March 2017, the Entrepreneurial You Podcast edition was born.
And then you're talking to entrepreneurs, not just in Jamaica, not just in the Caribbean, but now all over the world.
Yes. One of the things that gives me the greatest joy is sitting behind this microphone and having conversations with people like yourself, James, having conversations, just trying to, as it were, pick the brain of those who are doing amazing things globally. And of course, I started out, as I alluded to earlier, just focusing on entrepreneurs. But as I grow, like very quickly, I realized even part of what my own lack was when I started out as an entrepreneur, and it was leadership. I didn't know how to lead. And so I recognized that I needed to focus a lot more on leadership, right? So it's not just, entrepreneurs with the hard skills that I talk to, but I talk to global leaders, global entrepreneurs. I've had persons on like Seth Godin, who we talked about leadership and how ideas spread, and that conversation I really loved. I've had Richard Branson on the show when I was talking about, the secrets to a successful collaboration and why collaborate. I mean, I have spoken with Les Brown for my blog, not necessarily for this podcast, because when he was in Jamaica through the Entrepreneurial You, I interviewed him for my blog. And, I'm just learning so much from having conversations. It's amazing what a conversation can do. Every time I've done something major, it is through a conversation with somebody. It is never just by myself alone.
So I have to ask this question. Mention some of those names: Seth Godin, Richard Branson, Les Brown, all kind of giants in the world of entrepreneurship and speaking as well. What gave you the confidence to go and reach out to some of these? Because I can imagine other people just now watching or listening to this who maybe have their own podcasts, who have their own interview series, and these are kind of names that they would aspire to interviewing and having on their show. So tell me, how did those come about? How did those interviews come about? What gave you also the confidence to go and reach out to those speakers?
You know what I realized, and I wish I knew this, like my 40-year-old self will say this to my maybe 10, 15-year-old self, that we're all humans. We just need to have the right mindset. Everybody, when we bring it down, like there's a level playing field. Like we're all humans. We have the same challenges. We have the same issues. Yes, we may be different in terms of how we look and where we're from, but at the core, on the inside, we're all just the same. And so when you recognize that you're just as important as the next person, and the next person is just as important as you realize that you have no fear in approaching other persons. The only thing that you can hear, there are two options. Yes, well, perhaps three. Yes, no, or not no, later, right? So with that in mind, like without confidence, I'm from the land of Marcus Garvey, right? And without confidence, Marcus Garvey says, you are twice defeated in the race of life. With confidence, you've won even before you've begun. And it's that confidence that I have inside me. Of course, I'm empowered by the fact that I'm a firm believer in God and I am a child of God. And with that, I can do all things. And so reaching out to anybody, it's a matter of, making it appealing so that they want to be a part of it. Show them what it is that I'm building and how they can, add value to what I'm doing and how I can add value to what they're doing as well. So when I reach out, I just reach out with an expectancy that it is going to happen, right? There are some persons that have reached out to which it hasn't happened yet, but it will happen.
And so when you make those first approaches, are you going through a middle person, a middle man, or are you reaching out directly?
No. All right. So for example, they're all different. Like, what I love about the internet, and I say this all the time, is that it literally levels the playing field. Everything you want to know is on the internet, every single thing. So, and each case, I've mentioned three names, and in each case, those three have been different. So with Richard Branson, I was a Branson Center entrepreneur. So we have the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship Caribbean in Jamaica. And he was in Jamaica for the relaunch of the center because the center had been relocated to Kingston, and he was here. I'm like, oh, I have a podcast, and he fits the profile for the people I'm interviewing. So I just connected with the organizers here and say, hey, hook me up. Now there was just a funny story with Richard. It was the day before my birthday that I interviewed him about 2 years ago. So yeah. And so when he came into the room, it was like about 4 of us as media people in the room. You've recognized James. You see my hair. I really am very creative with my hair, right? So I had multicolored hair at the time, and he came in the room, and the first thing he said and saw was, "Oh, I love your hair." And we did the interview, and thanks, whatever. And we did the interview. So when he came off the stool, like I'm sitting on a stool right now, like he literally jumped off the stool, like could not wait for the interview to be over, and he took my hair and he put it over his, pretending that he had locks, and it was a moment. That's Richard Branson, true Richard Branson style.
Is there a photo exist of that moment as well?
Oh yeah, I have.
Okay,
that.
we're gonna find that photo, and we're gonna put that somewhere below.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you that photo, right? So yeah, so that was like the highlight, one of the highlights of our meeting and stuff, because he's very playful. And so for Les Brown, it was different. For Les Brown, when he came here to speak the second time, we had a conference, and he was the main speaker, and of course I was representing the Entrepreneurial You as well, because what I don't only do interviews, I leverage the podcast as a way to connect, and so I go to these events and I connect with people and say, hey, I'm representing the Entrepreneurial, I like an interview. And so it was on that basis, with as media person, I load backstage with him, and we just connected. And I remember because it was a lot of people, so there was much time for a long interview. But I remember asking him about succession planning and what's in place for that, and how his children are on board, and so on. His son was even there, and that was amazing as well. With Seth Godin, no, here is a trick. Like I started out by saying, anything you want is on the internet, right? So there's an app, and there are several other apps like those. Hunter.io, huntr.io.
Yeah, we use that. It's a great app.
It's a great app. You find the email address of anybody in the world that you want to find, right?
Yeah.
And so I found Seth's email address, and I just reach out to him, and like, okay, yeah. And that's it. The rest is history. And I remember when I had the 100th episode, which is in February of 2019, he said, I reached out to him because my top 10 episodes, he was in one of them. And of course, he was the most listened to episode as well. So I reached out to him, and, I said, hey, I just, it's our 100th episode. We need a congratulatory message from you. He sent it, and I did a replay of that episode because it was the most listened to episode over time. So yeah, and each guest, I treat each guest, as the individuals that they are, and everybody's been different. Over time, James, we were talking about creativity, and that was just, I love that interview as well.
But what's great about that, what you just described there, is you had that confidence, you go, you reach out, make those approaches, reach out to those people. And then when you get those, whatever percentage of those that you end up getting, that then gives you more confidence to go for more names. And it kind of just builds on itself. But it's making those first moves. As we start to finish up here, I'd love...
let me just interrupt you a bit. So, and as you talk about that, because my very first move was with John Lee Dumas. I had connected with John Lee Dumas over time, and just genuinely loving what he's doing, and so on. And I didn't even settle with an intention that, hey, I'm going to ask you on my show or anything, because at that time I didn't have a show. So I was genuinely interested in what he was doing. And I reached out to him when I was ready to start. And, he did my audio bumper for my show. So when you listen to my show, his voice is there saying, hey, this is the Entrepreneurial You with Heneka Watkis-Porter, etc. And so he was my very first guest. So, with that, so I pay tribute to John Lee Dumas, who has opened that door. And so on. And even when I found you, it was through a mutual connection out of India, right? BJ out of India. And so you realize how powerful the internet is, right?
It is. And it's amazing, there's John has got so many people started in podcasting. VJ has been doing the same especially in India and parts of Asia. You're doing the same, especially I know with a lot of women entrepreneurs, getting them that confidence to start their podcast. So great work that you're doing. As we start to finish up here, I'd love to know, you mentioned hunted.io. Are there any other tools that you use, online tools or apps you find very useful for the work that you do?
All right. So I mean, I love all things Google pretty much. Gmail with Boomerang. I love the fact that I can, I can schedule my emails. I love that. And go out, because sometimes, you draft an email, but you're traveling and you like that email to go out. Scheduling your emails is just amazing. Calendly. I love Calendly as well, because it takes, and especially because I connect with people from all over the world, different time zones, different schedules, and like, that backing and forthing of, okay, are you available Tuesday at 6? But okay, whose time are you talking about? So you eliminate all of that craziness, and you're able to now see the availability in your own time zone. So that for me, it is a great help. And of course, for designing and so on, I use Canva.com, which is a great tool for me. And yeah.
And then what about in terms of, if you to recommend one book to our listeners and also one album? I mean, you're in one of the most amazing music places in the world where you live. So what would that one book and that one album be?
All right. Okay. All right. So I love books. Maybe you're seeing so many books behind me, right? And my favorite one book would have been, if I had to choose one, would have been the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And we can talk about the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, as a matter of fact. But I'm going to just break your tradition and just tell you now about the one I'm reading, which is John Maxwell, How to Win with People. And that is just so sitting well with me right now. In terms of an album, I'd have to say it's the One Love album. One Love, Bob Marley, right? There is currently there, like, believe it or not, and this is a great thing that of example of when you're somewhere, you can take what you have for granted. So music is is our thing. And so you'd expect me, I know all things music. I don't. But what is really hot right now, I don't even know the name of the album, but this song that this very young lady is, her name is Coffee, and she does Toast. And this song is just gratitude, talks about gratitude. Gratitude is a must. I mean, you all need to listen to that song. I don't even know the name of the album that song.
What we'll do is we're going to we'll put links here on the show notes so people can go and listen to that as well. I mean, it's amazing. I find that you mentioned that Jamaica has, was it 0.4% of the worldwide population?
0.004, right?
But how well it punches above its weight internationally. And it does it through culture, because the music's so well known. Obviously, the food is depending on where you are in the world. I'm UK, so we also know the foods. The Jamaican food has a really strong.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Well, so
I haven't had breakfast yet.
Yeah, so you have a lot of things, great things that spreading that message around the world. So a final question for you here, Heneka. Let's imagine you woke up tomorrow morning and you have to start from scratch. So you have all the skills you've acquired over the years, but no one knows you. You know no one. What would you do? How would you restart things?
That's a great question. First I would have to get very, very quiet, because I realize great things happen in my quiet time. So once I get very, very quiet, I would go to perhaps the beach or somewhere where I just get to. I cannot swim. Another thing I'm putting out there as a Jamaican. Shame on me, right? So I go to the beach and just sit by the shore, just think, and I'd probably walk with my paper, dump everything that's in my head, right? All the ideas floating around, just dump them on paper. Start, brainstorming. And once I brainstorm, I start to put things together. Get the ideas a little more tighter. Go to some place where I can meet people, because nothing happens without people. As much as sometimes I like to think I can do this all by myself and I'm great by me, I can do well by myself. No, right? We all need people. So go to somewhere where there's find an activity going on and just connect with people and see how I can add value first of all, and then how I can start from scratch with their input, get their ideas. That's how I'd start.
Great. And talking about connecting, what's the best way for people to connect with you, to learn more about the podcast and all of the books and the other things that you've got going on just now? Where should they go?
Okay, great. So HenekaWatkis-Porter.com is the best place that you can find me on one platform. But of course, if you're a social media junkie like I am, then you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Perfect. And we'll put all those links here on the show notes. Heneka, thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing all about your creative life. I wish you all the best with all the different projects that you have going on. And hopefully we'll get a chance to share a stage, maybe in Jamaica at some point in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, James. It has been a pleasure.
If you're interested in living a more creative life, then I'd love to invite you to join me as I share some of the most successful strategies and techniques that high-performing creatives use. I put them all together in a free downloadable ebook that you can get by going to jamestaylor.me. That's jamestaylor.me to get your free downloadable ebook on creativity.